Science has always been about curiosity. It's about asking the impossible question and daring to find the answer. From curing diseases to exploring the universe, humanity's thirst for knowledge has changed the world. But sometimes, curiosity can cross a line. Sometimes, the pursuit of truth leads to pain, suffering, and horror. These are 10 scientific experiments that went too far, moments when science forgot about ethics and human lives paid the price. In 1971, a psychology experiment at Stanford University spiraled into chaos. Professor Philip Zimbardo recruited 24 students to play guards and prisoners in a mock prison built in the basement of the psychology department. It was meant to study how people behave in systems of power. But within days, the guards became cruel and abusive. Prisoners broke down, cried, screamed, begged to leave. Zimbardo himself got lost in the illusion, taking on the role of prison warden. The experiment was meant to last 2 weeks. It ended after 6 days. The Stanford prison experiment showed how ordinary people can become monsters when given authority. It revealed something terrifying about human nature, that evil doesn't always come from villains. Sometimes it comes from us. But the abuse of human subjects wasn't limited to psychology. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service began a study in Tuskegee, Alabama. The goal was to observe the natural progression of syphilis in black men. 600 men participated. None of them were told they had syphilis. They were promised free health care, but in reality they were being studied as the disease slowly destroyed their bodies. Even after penicillin became the known cure in the 1940s, doctors withheld treatment. For 40 years, these men were deceived. Dozens died. Their wives were infected. Their children were born with congenital syphilis. When the truth finally surfaced in 1972, it became one of the darkest chapters in medical history, a betrayal of trust in the name of science. Some experiments blur the line between truth and legend. One of the most famous is the so-called Soviet sleep experiment. The story goes that, in the 1940s, Russian scientists sealed 5 political prisoners in a gas chamber filled with a stimulant designed to keep them awake for 30 days. After days without sleep, the subjects began to hallucinate, scream, mutilate themselves, and eventually die. The experiment became a horror story that spread across the internet. But while the tale is fiction, it was inspired by real Cold War research on sleep deprivation and psychological endurance. The truth is less dramatic, but just as disturbing. During the 20th century, both the Soviets and Americans pushed the human body and mind to terrifying limits in search of military advantage. If you think that's dark, the next one is worse, because it's real. From the 1940s through the 1970s, the U.S. government secretly conducted human radiation experiments. Pregnant women were given radioactive iron to test absorption rates. Soldiers were ordered to stand under nuclear detonations to observe their effects. Hospital. Patients were injected with plutonium without consent. The people involved were never told the truth. They were treated as data points, not as human beings. Many later developed cancers, deformities, or died without knowing why. It wasn't until decades later that these experiments were exposed, revealing a chilling disregard for life in the name of national security and scientific curiosity. In 1939, researchers at the University of Iowa decided to study the causes of stuttering. They called it the Monster Study. They took orphans, children who had already suffered loss, and split them into 2 groups. One group was praised for their speech. The other was constantly criticized, mocked, and told they spoke badly. The goal was to see if negative reinforcement could cause stuttering. The result was devastating. Some of the children developed lifelong speech problems and severe anxiety. The researchers learned something about language. but at the cost of innocence. It was an experiment that truly lived up to its name. During World War II, Japan's Imperial Army established Unit 731, a secret biological warfare research facility in occupied China. What happened there defies comprehension. Prisoners, including men, women, and children, were subjected to vivisections without anesthesia. They were infected with deadly diseases, frozen alive, or exposed to poison gas. Thousands were killed. After the war, the scientists responsible were never tried. Many were granted immunity by the US in exchange for their research data. The atrocities of Unit 731 are a horrifying reminder that science, when stripped of morality, can become a weapon of pure evil. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment on obedience. Participants were told they were helping test learning by administering electric shocks to another person. The shocks weren't real, but the participants didn't know that. With each wrong answer, they were told to increase the voltage. Even as the learner screamed in pain, many participants continued. Why? Because the authority figure in the lab coat told them to. 60-5% went all the way to what they believed were lethal shocks. The Milgram experiment revealed a terrifying truth. Most people will obey authority, even if it means hurting someone else. Evil doesn't always require hatred. Sometimes it just requires obedience. But perhaps the most infamous government project of all was MK-Ultra. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA ran a top-secret mind control program. They tested LSD, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation on soldiers, prisoners, and even ordinary citizens, often without their knowledge or consent. They hoped to find a way to control human behavior, to create super spies or brainwashed assassins. The experiments destroyed lives. Some subjects lost their sanity. Some never recovered. When the project was exposed in the 1970s, much of the evidence had already been destroyed. MK-Ultra became a symbol of paranoia, power, and the danger of science without restraint. In the 1930s, one man believed he had found a cure for mental illness. His name was Dr. Walter Freeman, and his procedure was the lobotomy. Using an instrument like an ice pick, he inserted it through the patient's eye socket to sever connections in the brain's frontal lobe. He performed thousands of lobotomies on adults, teenagers, even children. At first, the results seemed promising. Patients appeared calm, quiet, and manageable, but in reality, many were left with severe brain damage, personality loss, or complete incapacity. Freeman's miracle was a horror show, proof that even the desire to heal can turn into something monstrous. Not every experiment in this list was cruel by design, but fear itself can turn science into something terrifying. In 2008, the world watched as scientists activated the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. It was the most powerful particle accelerator ever built, designed to recreate the conditions of the Big Bang. But before it was even turned on, panic spread across the internet. Conspiracy theorists claimed it could create a black hole and swallow the Earth. Lawsuits were filed. News outlets called it the end of the world. Of course, the collider didn't destroy the planet. But the hysteria revealed something deeper. How easily fear can overshadow understanding, and how even pure science can feel threatening when it reaches beyond what we can comprehend. Science is one of humanity's greatest powers, but power demands responsibility. Every experiment on this list began with curiosity. With the question, what if? But curiosity without conscience can lead to tragedy. The Stanford prison guards didn't think they were capable of cruelty. The doctors in Tuskegee didn't think of their patients as victims. The scientists of Unit 731 believed they were serving their country. Each one thought they were doing something important, until it went too far. Progress doesn't always come from courage. Sometimes, it comes from caution. from remembering that just because we can do something doesn't mean we should dot. Science can heal, build, and inspire dot, but it can also destroy dot. The line between genius and madness is thin, and history has proven that once you cross it, there's no turning back dot. So the next time you hear about a groundbreaking new experiment or an unbelievable discovery, remember this: every step forward in science walks beside a shadow dot. And sometimes, it's that shadow that tells the truest story of all.